concept of defense by insanity has existed since ancient Greek and Roman times. However, it was in colonial America that a delusional woman named Dorothy Talby was hanged in 1638 for murdering her daughter. And at the time, Massachusetts common law made no distinction between insanity and criminal behaviour. And it was Edward II, under English common law, declared that if a person had the mental capacity no more of quote unquote a wild beast, that they should be spurred trial by ordeal, because they were likely insane. But then, of course, trial by jury replaced this, and jury members were expected to find the insane guilty and then refer the case to the king for royal pardon. So, of course, things have changed a lot from those days, but the concept of defense by insanity has still remained controversial. And I think that's because part of the whole defense strategy would have to try and prove that the person didn't have understanding of their actions, which brings me to the case that I wanted to talk about today. This is extremely controversial, and there's going to be very strong opinions on either side. And I'm going to try and take, as much into account as possible. And I also want to talk about postpartum depression and psychosis, because it's very important that people talk about this more, because you'd be surprised how common it is. So to understand the complexity of this crime and the trial, it is important to take a look into the background, I think, of the person who was at the centre of it. Andrea Yates was born in Houston, Texas, and she was actually the youngest of 5 children to a German immigrant and a Irish father. I think that his parents or he was born in Ireland, but she was raised in a Catholic household. She was a very accomplished teenager from what I read. She graduated in 1982 and she was the class valedictorian, the captain of the swim team, and an officer in the National Honor Society. She also completed a 2-year pre-nursing program at the University of Houston and graduated from the University of Texas School of Nursing. And from 1986 to 1994, she worked as a nurse actually at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center. So Andrea was, someone who, dare I say, came across as pretty much like perfect. She was very accomplished in a lot that she did. And from what we read too, she did have quite a religious background. It's interesting as well, I heard one of her friends saying that she never dated anyone through college. I'm not exactly sure why that was, but maybe she was just more focused on, achieving things in her young life, or as well, maybe, her religious beliefs sort of influenced the kind of person she was looking for. But it's interesting nonetheless. And in the summer of 1989, she actually met Rusty Yates at Sunscape Apartments in Houston, and he was actually 2 months younger than her, and they soon moved in together and were married on April 17th, 1993, and they announced that they would seek to have as many babies as nature allowed. And afterwards, they bought a 4-bedroom house in the town of Friendswood. And in 1994, they had their first child, a son named Noah. Shortly thereafter, Rusty actually accepted a job offer in Florida, and the family relocated to a small trailer. And by the birth of their 3rd son, Paul, they settled back to Houston and purchased a motorhome. So if you're anything like me, you're probably wondering what would cause, a family with a husband with a good job and 2 children to move from a suburban house into a trailer. And the answer is actually pretty interesting, and it starts when Rusty was in his undergraduate years. He met a man named Michael Warnecki, who was a preacher who roamed college campuses with a message which was quote unquote, "You're going to hell." Someone that definitely had a strong message that he wanted to get across, and it actually resonated with Rusty, and they struck up a friendship and they stayed in touch. And it was actually Michael Warnecki's wife who was writing letters to Andrea. And in the letters that she wrote, there was leaflets included which said that women had a biblical duty to endure natural childbirth as a quote-unquote humbling rite of passage, and that Andrea Yates was to give birth to all her children without the aid of medication, which she did. Their decision to abandon their suburban house was in favour of a nomadic lifestyle, and this happened, after they gave birth to the first two children. They actually lived for a time in a converted Greyhound bus as well that they bought off the Warreneckis for $37,000. They said that they loved their new simplicity, with Rusty apparently saying, "We had a lot of stuff, a surprising amount of stuff, and it became burdensome." So they wanted more, simplicity in their life. It was also said that the reason why they wanted this simplicity in their life was that they insisted on moving into the trailer because they feared their children would become materialistic. And they actually held a garage sale where Andrea, sold all her wedding gifts, furniture, and everything except her sewing machine and cookware. So basically, Andrea had, worked all her life to become a nurse, and Rusty as well to become an engineer. And that would have afforded them quite a comfortable way of life, but they forego it all for their religious beliefs that they were engaging with the Warreneckis. So I find that to be quite interesting, for the start of, the setting for what happens next, because it was quite extreme beliefs. Then following the birth of their fourth son, Luke, Andrea became very depressed. The media actually alleged that her condition was influenced by extremist sermons of Michael Warrenecki, but also her family were concerned by the way that she was, so captivated by his words. And on June the 16th, 1999, Rusty found Andrea shaking and chewing her own fingers. And the next day, she attempted to commit suicide by overdosing on pills. She was admitted to the hospital and prescribed antidepressants, and then after her release she begged her husband to let her die as she held a knife up to her neck. So obviously Andrea was very, very ill, and once again hospitalised. She was given a mixture of medications including Haldol, an antipsychotic drug, and her condition actually improved when she started taking this antipsychotic drug, and she was prescribed it on her release. And after that, Rusty decided to move into a small house for the sake of her health. It was interesting as well when I talk about the leaflets that, the Warreneckis give Andrea. One of them said that on the leaflet, by the time a child is 14 or 15 years old, it's too late. If you feed them with the world's ways, you reap what you sow. And the defence lawyer in court asked Rusty, "Do you have any idea how the information you just read would play into the mind of a psychotic individual?" Which is, very true. If she was already feeling, quite turbulent and psychotic, being exposed to these kind of extreme views, it's not a good story, to be honest. And in July 1999, she succumbed to a nervous breakdown, which culminated in 2 suicide attempts and 2 psychiatric hospitalizations that summer. And it was then she was diagnosed with postpartum psychosis. And I just want to take a moment to describe briefly a bit more about postpartum depression and psychosis, because I think it's very important to talk about. And I got this information from an article that I will link below, and they stated that as many as 50 to 75% of new mothers experience a shift in their emotions called the baby blues after delivery. That is extremely high, 50 to 75%, and up to 15% of these women will develop the more severe and long-lasting depression called postpartum depression. And then women with postpartum depression may experience emotional highs and lows, frequent crying, fatigue, guilt, anxiety, and difficulties caring for the baby. And postpartum depression, of course, can be treated. And the thing about postpartum depression is it's actually a complex mix of physical, emotional and behavioural changes that occur after giving birth. And it's attributed actually to the chemical, social and psychological changes associated with having a baby. It is common, like I said, 50 to 70% of new mothers experience these baby blues. But the more severe and long lasting depression, it really only affects around 15% of the population. And only 1 in 1,000 women will develop postpartum psychosis, which is quite obviously what is going on here. And did you know that Andrea's first psychiatrist, Dr. Eileen Starbranch, said that the couple should not have any more children as it would guarantee future psychotic depression, but they conceived their fifth and final child approximately 7 weeks after her discharge. And she stopped taking Haldol, of course, in March 2000 and gave birth to daughter Mary on November the 30th of that year. And apparently she seemed to be coping well until the death of her father on March 12th, 2001. So I think it's interesting because Rusty was said in an interview that I watched that the way they sort of thought about it is they knew Andrea would get sick if she had a baby again, but they compared it really weirdly to if someone was going to give you, a really nice car and you're going to have the flu afterwards for 2 weeks, would you take the risk? And I don't know, that's a bit weird for me to think because this was obviously a lot more dangerous than having the flu. On April 1st, 2001, that she came under the care of Dr. Mohammed Saeed, and she was treated by him and later released. And on the 3rd of May of that same year, she actually ended up degenerating back into a near catatonic state and drew a bath in the middle of the day. And that was quite alarming. Apparently, her mother-in-law asked Andrea, "Why are you running a bath, in the middle of the day?" And she apparently said, "I might have some use for it." She did tell the police later that she planned to drown the children that day, but had decided against doing it at that point. She was hospitalised, of course, the next day. This was actually after a doctor visited her and her psychiatrist deemed that she was suicidal and had filled the tub to drown herself. So she was under Dr. Saeed's care again until June the 20th. And when Rusty left for work, leaving her alone to watch the children against Dr. Saeed's instructions to supervise her around the clock, Rusty's mother, Dora Yates, had been scheduled to arrive an hour later to take over for her. In the space of that hour, she drowned all 5 children. The trial was incredibly controversial and interesting, with Andrea confessing to drowning her children, and she told Dr. Michael Weiner that she waited for Rusty to leave for work that morning before filling the bathtub because she knew he would have prevented her from harming the children. And after the killings, police found the family dog locked up, and Rusty advised the doctor that it had normally been allowed to run free. So when he had left the house that morning, leading the psychiatrist to believe that Andrea had locked it in a cage to prevent it from interfering with her killing the children one by one. But the defence expert testimony agreed that Andrea was psychotic, and in order to successfully assert the insanity defence, the defendant must prove that he or she could not tell right from wrong at the time of the crime. And in 2002, the jury rejected the insanity defence and found her guilty. And I find that's really interesting because I think one of the reasons why they did that and rejected that defence was because Andrea was a religious person and she said that Satan made her do it. And I remember watching a documentary that one of the arguments was made that if a religious person knows that Satan's wrong and God is right, that if Satan made her do it, then she knew it was wrong. It was really complex the way they sort of framed it, and interesting, but I don't know, you still can't doubt that this woman was incredibly ill. But she was found guilty, and although the prosecution had sought the death penalty, the jury didn't think that that was appropriate, and she was sentenced to life imprisonment, eligibility for parole in 40 years. But it was in 2005 that the Texas Court of Appeals reversed the convictions because a California psychiatrist and prosecution witness, Dr. Park Dietz, admitted he had given materially false testimony during the trial. And Andrea again entered pleas of not guilty by insanity, and she was granted release on bail that she would be admitted to a mental health facility in 2006 when the trial was taking place. And then in July 26th, 2006, after 3 days of deliberations, she was actually found not guilty by reason of insanity. And she was committed to the North Texas State Hospital. And in 2007, she was actually moved to a low security state mental hospital in Texas, in Kerrville. So although psychiatrists for both the prosecutors and defense agreed that she was very mentally ill at the time she killed her children, the prosecution asserted that she was aware enough to judge her actions as right or wrong despite her mental defect. They also actually implied that she was trying to get revenge on Rusty, and I seen that was the reason why the defense didn't go after Rusty at all, because if they did and they tried to make Rusty, this very bad person that was, very negligent and didn't care, then it would have given more food for thought for that particular motive. So I understand why they didn't do that. And the original jury did believe she was legally aware of her actions, but they did disagree that her motive was spousal revenge, which I think, partly plays into the fact that they didn't go after Rusty, which was a really good move. And in 2006, the jury completely disagreed with all the prosecution's assertions and the conviction was overturned. Like I said as well, I believe that Andrea's mental health wasn't something that just occurred around her adult years and when she was a mother. Apparently she was bulimic in her teenage years. She suffered from depression. At the age of 17, she spoke to a friend about suicide. So of course Andrea is in hospital, she is being treated in a mental hospital. But in 2012, she was actually allowed to leave to go attend church, and apparently it was baby steps to adapt to the outside world. So there has been talks about Andrea maybe one day being able to leave hospital. And a forensic psychiatrist actually said that it's always healthy for patients to be reintroduced into society, and church is a good support network and a source of strength for many people. The only concern would be making sure she's no longer having any type of delusion that might affect her understanding of spiritual scripture. They also said that it's not like she's going to be turned loose without any care or any way to support herself. She will basically be under the spotlight if she's ever released. So that implies that there would be ongoing care for Andrea Yates if she was released from prison. If you ask me, it's so complicated. Like, what happened is so tragic, and those children, despite what anyone says, are the biggest victims in this case. They were innocent children who were kind of neglected in that their mother was so mentally ill that she posed a threat to them, but nothing really was done about it. Nobody seemed to think of the kids in this case. I do think that Andrea Yates was extremely mentally ill. I think that there were steps that could have prevented that, but they weren't prioritised or taken, and this tragedy could have been prevented, which I know it's controversial to say, but I really do believe that if Andrea had more care, if Andrea had more support, if Andrea, wasn't in this masochistic, self-sacrificing lifestyle that she, became a part of, that this tragedy probably wouldn't have happened. In terms of her husband, Rusty, I don't think Rusty's a bad person, but I think maybe he was a bit careless in, the fact that he didn't 100% keep enough of an eye on Andrea from what I read, and even convincing to have another kid, like that could have been Andrea too, her own beliefs, but she was mentally ill, and the mentally sound person there, I feel like they should have prevented it. Because it's sad to say, but their ironic thing is they wanted that one more kid, but they ended up losing all of them because of it. And I just think it's tragic. I think it's so important to talk about cases like this. Postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis is a part of society, and it's something that isn't really talked about, and it will always now be associated with Andrea Yates. So I think that is that's pretty sad, but also I feel like we could learn a lot from it. It's so interesting because I feel like there's so much different things involved that make it almost unbelievable, like the overzealousness of the lifestyle, the neglect in that, this was something that everybody kind of knew there was a risk for, and the tragedy that now 5 children are dead and their mother will, be in a mental hospital most likely for the rest of her life. I just think it's so sad. And in my opinion, there's so many risk factors that we should talk about in terms of preventing something like this happening. Like, I personally believe that more should be done. People should take mental illness seriously, and all the cries for help that Andrea did, make before anything was ever done, and the last final cry for help was something that she'll never be able to come back from. I don't know. I'd like to hear what you guys think. And do you think that Andrea can be, released and reintegrated into society? What are your thoughts on like Rusty too and his part in this? And the doctors and everything. I'd like to hear what you guys think. And I hope you enjoyed this installment on my channel. I'll be back again very soon. Bye.